I'm Matt.
I'm Shane.
And if you like what you hear, make sure you hit that thumbs up button real hard, and make sure you subscribe to Comic Movie Marks.
And also click that little bell for all of the notifications.
Whee!
Always remember,
If Trailer Trash can do it,
anyone can do it. Hello and welcome everyone to another Comic Movie Marks video.
what happens when mediocrity wins? This concept kind of came about for us personally when I saw a Screen Rant article saying Avengers Endgame doesn't have to be a good film to succeed. Pretty much saying that no matter what drivel that Marvel puts out at this point, we are going to go watch it. The fans are going to go watch it. Does that kind of lend to the fact that you don't have to make a good movie in order to make a shit ton of money? Just recently, we had Captain Marvel, which is probably one of the most mediocre movies made by Marvel, and yet it crossed the $1 billion mark. Is that, though, a recent phenomenon, though? Mediocrity winning? Kind of go back a little bit and see that it hasn't just been a recent thing. And we also look at other forms of entertainment as well. Is mediocrity winning in all facets of entertainment when it comes to music, video games, and movies?
Also, my band is playing tonight at an inconvenient time. It's 6 unshowered guys and a pale woman with a ukulele shouting "hey" in unison. Because that's what music is now. Hey! Hey!
Lack of variety in music. All this music sounds almost the same at this point. And this isn't old man, like the newer music doesn't sound the way I like it type stuff. I can still enjoy some new music here and there, but you can't tell me it doesn't start sounding all the same.
Exactly. Back in my day.
Top 40, though, is ruling the radio stations. Now you have literally something called pop country. Hip hop and rap and pop have kind of all messed into one. Just look at Nicki Minaj.
Oh my gosh, look at her butt.
You look at why mumble rap is the hottest thing now, where a rapper can literally mumble the lyrics and people gravitate towards it. They love it. As Matt brought up earlier, you have country that has now blended several different genres. Taylor Swift is a prime example of that. It's all kind of blended together to sound the same. I've seen YouTube videos. Someone has spliced together the top songs in country and they all had the same exact formula.
This new wave of mid-tempo songs with these douchey sounding guys kind of talk, sing, rapping over snap tracks.
I'm a dirt road in the headlights. I'm a mama's boy. I'm a fist fight.
And right now, as we see, there's no one that really transcends a genre, just the genre. There might be famous people in music, but there's no one that transcends a genre. There's no Elvis, there's no Beatles, there's no Michael Jackson, there's no Tupac or Vanilla Ice.
Prime example are the top 10 artists of 2018. Number 10, Camila Cabello. Cabello?
Way to go, Shane. Way to make it sound old.
Oh, it's gonna get worse. Number 9, Bruno Mars. Number 8, BTS. That's a Korean pop band, K-pop band, BTS. Number 7, Imagine Dragons. Number 6, XXX Tentacion, I believe. Sounding even older. Number 5, Cardi B. 4, Taylor Swift. 3, Ed Sheeran. 2, Post Malone. Number 1 was Drake. Think about that. That is your top artist in 2018. And some of you young whippersnappers are probably like, oh, that's a swell. Actually, young whippersnappers wouldn't say swell.
That's a lit list.
Exactly.
Don't be throwing shade at Drake.
Yeah.
Yo.
You're just salty. You're triggered.
By the way, it's defensive and dick. All right? That's what those words mean. God, what's wrong with those? That sounds even older. Oh, man, there's a lot of fist waving in this episode.
I'm not saying those artists aren't decent, aren't solid. I enjoy some of the music that comes from those artists, but it is pretty surprising that that is your list of top 10 artists of 2018. And the fact that they are all pretty much roughly the same genre, that should tell you something.
This isn't music! Now, when I was a kid, you dressed like a woman and you sung about the devil. Now that was music.
Now, to make us sound even older, we're going to talk about video games. Even in our time, you see this. There's always fads in video game. You want to capitalize on what the hot thing is. That happens with all forms of entertainment. We understand that. Of course, you want to go towards the thing that is driving people towards your game. Of course, you're going to have a bunch of clones of each other.
Lately, I feel like I've been playing the same ones over and over and over again. We here at the Wolf Den already know that certain game mechanics, and especially control schemes, have already been standardized throughout the medium. But there is a fine line. There needs to be some curveball thrown in there so it's not just the same game copy and pasted over and over again.
And right now we see a lot with this Battle Royale mode with Fortnite, Apex Legends, Call of Duty, Battlefield 5. I think they finally got that put in their game. You look at these now and they're all like kind of free to play, except for Call of Duty and Battlefield 5. They charge $60 for the same shit that Fortnite and Apex Legends do for free. Then you look at a quote by Blake Jorgensen, EA's CFO, in reaction to EA closing down Visceral Games. He said, trying to build a game that really pushed gameplay to the next level. And as we kept reviewing the game, it continued to look like a style of gaming as much more linear game that people don't like as much today as they did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Basically saying that single player story mode, a linear story mode game, is not as popular as it was before. What? Because now everything has to be connected. Everything has to be online. Day one patches now. I mean, if you're over a certain age, you would never conceive of the idea of a day one patch. But now you have to consistently update your games. The fact that you get a finished, polished game day one doesn't happen anymore. You basically have to get a patch on the first day that you start playing it. Then you have to install. And that's why games like Red Dead Redemption, which had an awesome single player mode, get praised by fans and critics because it's something that we don't see much anymore. The creativity starts to falter the more and more you make games more basic and generic.
A lot of the gaming companies will utilize the web-based downloadable characters, the patches. If you are late to the show when a new release game comes out, be ready. It's going to take hours for you to get all the updated content because they will continue to pump out every single week. Some of these games are weekly updates. If you look at 2018, Fortnite made $3 billion in profit in 2018. PUBG, which is another battle royale game, $1 billion. Battlefield 5 sold 7.3 million copies with its battle royale. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 was the 2018 best-selling game that made $1.5 billion. And then most recently, Apex Legends, that came out in February of this year, had the best launch month of any free-to-play game in history. Apex Legends generated an estimated $92 million from in-game spending across all platforms, with the majority coming from console alone. That is obnoxious numbers. It's astounding that you can have these games that, yes, they are free to play and that's how they hook you in, but then they continue to update it weekly, monthly. The most common thing for Fortnite is the themes that they will publish based on the type of year. They've had World Cup skins, Avengers skins. They are going to have an Avengers Endgame skin and playable characters that are very similar. They have NFL skins. No matter what it is, they will pull you in, and that's how they make so much money. The amount of money that people are spending, it's worth the price of a single console. Hundreds of and thousands of dollars on these games that are initially free to play.
Free to play games and almost mobile games in general are ruling the market. Personal experience, I played a mobile game and I knew people that spent upwards to $40,000, $60,000, $80,000 on this mobile game, the game you can play on your phone. It was insane. And then they would turn around and sell these accounts for almost that amount. It was literally insane to see how something like that could even go. And I'm sure there's some people out there hearing this like, oh yeah, that happens all the time. Because I know there's literally companies like that. These people play these games and sell these accounts to people. You buy already built up accounts. But the fact that people just don't have the ability to play these games, or linear games in themselves, are not intriguing enough anymore, according to Blake Jorgensen of EA, I think is a missed concept. And I think it's what drives people away and only keeps certain people there that are willing to dump in dollar after dollar. So when you hear things like what Blake Jorgensen says, It's not that people don't want linear games anymore. It's that there's more money in the market of free-to-play or mobile app type games. They're generic, easily can be pumped out year after year, updated constantly week after week, and they become financial successes. It starts to become frustrating because you start seeing the market become diluted. And when you actually do get that game every once in a while that transcends the single player genre, it's enjoyed, but it's sadly forgotten. In the entertainment world, movies are kind of that last little bit that every once in a while you still see some creative juices. You still see some people trying to push the envelope or make something different. More and more lately, it becomes more obvious that you have to have a franchise. You have to have a connected universe. The MCU started this trend in 2008 with Iron Man 1. And now you got like the Godzilla universe. Even you have other companies, other comic book studios trying to do the same thing with Sony, with Fox, with obviously WB. And it all centers around how much can you milk from this genre, the fads that they are, especially when it comes to the universe genre. You start seeing a common trend when it comes to certain movies. And you look at the Marvel movies, you see that they are, for the most part, mass-produced movies. They have an algorithm. They have a formula to them.
That seems to be the most common thing that we see in all of entertainment is formulas. And we're not saying that formula is a good or bad thing necessarily, but Marvel, Disney does have a formula. They use it with the MCU. Disney's most latest thing that we'll get into is with the rehash of a lot of the animated movies. If you look at video games, there's a formula now with Battle Royale. If you look at music, there's a formula. As I mentioned earlier, YouTubers have pieced together the top songs from a single genre. They all have the same exact formula. Once these companies figure that out, that's where a lot of the creativity gets pushed to the wayside, and we are forced to consume a formulaic form of entertainment, whether it's movies, games, or music.
Why is it? Because movies got so expensive to make, you couldn't take risks on stories that we didn't already know about.
Yeah.
So right now, the only movies we see are either big budget that have a built-in audience or $3 million comedy.
Vince McKinney of the Film Drunk Frocast made a point in reference to November's smash hit of Thor Ragnarok that stuck with me. The Marvel Cinematic Universe operates largely with an algorithm programmed to maximize profits, rendering directorial input and creativity moot. I jokingly worry about the future in which the only films are entries into the Marvel, Star Wars, or Fast and Furious franchise programmed to appeal to the widest audience possible, marketed through various other properties owned by the same conglomerates.
But the movie you just talked about is only being made for the global audience. And you see it like all over the place. I mean, I saw the Mamma Mia sequel, Here We Go Again, and I couldn't believe how much attention had been paid to the global needs of the box office in terms of a kind of bland, inoffensive cleanliness in terms, and also a kind of borderline dumbness of where anybody in any language can understand exactly what's going on in every scene because of the, facial expressions of the characters. And I'm sure, since 70% of the global audience is not going to be seeing this movie in their language, that's kind of what the demands are. And that's true for all the Marvel movies as well. And so what you've lost is a kind of idiom, and an idiosyncratic American idiom has gone.
And then you get that idea. Okay, so how do you get mass appeal? Well, PG-13, which came about in 1984. Spielberg actually went in and actually made a suggestion to the MPAA board about a PG-13 rating. Spielberg said, I went to Jack Valenti, who's a friend of mine, and said, Jack, why don't we do a rating called PG-13, which would suit films like Gremlins or Indy 2? So I called Jack, and Jack said, leave it to me. So that's kind of how the genesis of PG-13 came about. Gremlins, Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom had a couple graphic images, but they were only rated PG-13. One thing from my childhood that I completely enjoyed was Beetlejuice was rated PG, and there's that great part where Michael Keaton, as Beetlejuice, says,
"You're working with a professional here! Nice fucking models!
But then you also kind of keep reading this article. It also says studios and filmmakers did not view the new rating as a potential punishment. Rather, it was liberating. Philosophy transformed PG-13 rating into a marketing tool. It promised edge without threatening offense. The disposable income teens spend coming back again and again, and their few favorite flicks, a fuel keeps Hollywood running. Something else to add, unlike here in the United States, over in the UK, they have something called the BBFC, which is their rating board similar to the MPAA here in the United States. In this Den of Geek article, the BBFC's rating theoretically blocked access to children under the age of 12, even if they were accompanied by adults. That rating remained in force until 2002, when the old 12 certification was replaced by 12A, a rating which permits children under 12 to see a given film as long as they're accompanied by someone over the age of 18. The article continues saying, as a quick look at this list of Box Office Mojo proves, PG-13 movies became increasingly big business as the 90s ended and the new millennium began. Movie studios were deliberately avoiding giving their movies G ratings and opting for a higher PG rating instead. As one news story from 1984 put it, the G rating is avoided by studios since even younger children disdain G movies as kid stuff. Just as the G rating once denoted a toothless, inoffensive film likely aimed at little kids, now it was PG-13 certificate that had the broader appeal. Gremlins director Joe Dante told the Associated Press in 2004, people will go out of their way to put a dirty word in it just to get the rating that they need to give the picture some legitimacy, so the kids won't feel like they're going to see their little brother's movie. The article continues, when it comes to box office performance, PG-13 movies, the number speaks for themselves. Of the top 10 highest grossing films worldwide, all but one, that's Disney's Frozen, have a PG-13 rating. The most successful R-rated movie of all time at the time of writing is Deadpool, which is the current international gross of $756 million, places it behind Amazing Spider-Man at the 66th biggest film of all time. Little wonder then that as the budgets for movies have increased and the appetite for superhero movies have grown, studios have increasingly sought to make their major films fit a PG-13 certificate. As this article from The Dissolve, a site now sadly defunct, points out, this has resulted in franchises once aimed at older audiences, The Terminator and Die Hard, bent and softened to fit a PG-13 mold. Something that will happen to movies will be tweaked and deliberately toned down or toned up in some cases to hit that PG-13 mark. The PG-13 mark has become a marketing strategy now for studios, and the box office shows it. And something like that is naturally going to hinder creativity in movies.
If you look at every topic that we're discussing, it is all pushed along by money. That's the root of all evil as spoken. That is the motivating factor for most companies. If you look at movies that have made $1 billion and they're linked to being unique or creative, there have been a total of 38 movies that have crossed the $1 billion mark. Only 6 of those have come before 2008. So 32 of them have been within only the last 10 years. 19 of them have been since 2015. So 4 years ago, we've had 19 movies cross the $1 billion mark. Some of those movies, they may surprise you: Zootopia, Alice in Wonderland, Despicable Me 3, Transformers Age of Extinction, Transformers Dark of the Moon, Minions, both Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Of course, we've had some other movies, Avengers, Avengers and Avengers, Civil War, most recently Captain Marvel. We've had Aquaman. That is what companies are looking for. That is their end goal. It's not the creative process. It's how do we make the most money off of this movie? How do we cross that $1 billion mark?
And creativity has become so short-sighted lately. More and more, when you see a director try to be more creative, he gets punished for it. He gets told, you're not doing it the right way. This is the way you got to do it. This isn't family friendly. This isn't what kids should see. This isn't what my superhero would do. But when it comes to like these reboots, these remakes, sequels that we've seen constantly now, look at Disney right now. They are basically going back through all their 90s animated movies, and they are redoing almost all of them now live action. The work is pretty much done for them when it comes to the creativity part of it. Now they just got to make the movie work in live action. There's safety in established brand names. Creativity means taking a risk, and fewer decision makers writing the checks appear willing to take those risks.
And guess what? Beauty and the Beast also crossed $1 billion, $1.2 billion worldwide.
And here's the thing when it comes to these movies. Nostalgia can be a curse and a blessing.
Netflix will keep Friends through next year in $100 million
They're paying $100 million, right? For 1 year of Friends, and then The Office too.
You know what that is, though? That's like nostalgia.
Nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
So all viewing right now is nostalgia.
What we have seen recently with Aladdin is they're retelling the story again, but there's people that are already pushing back because Robin Williams isn't able to play the genie. They have Will Smith taking over. And that's what studios are almost fighting against at this point. It's not creativity and whether or not this is a good story. It's whether or not it rings well with the nostalgia. You see what happened with Last Jedi. It didn't ring well with a lot of people that love the previous Star Wars movies. And that was mainly a nostalgia thing. Solo did horrible. It was a rejection of what happened with The Last Jedi / no one wanted to know the story of Han Solo. It wasn't an appealing process. They didn't need an answer for every little thing, how he got his blaster, how he got his name. Nostalgia is introduced into it, especially when it comes to certain superhero movies, when you see nostalgia introduced into childhood movies or games. Nostalgia is used to prop up a movie. Looking at Captain Marvel, they used 90s nostalgia as cheap punchlines throughout the movie. Oh, look, there's a Radio Shack. Oh, look, I have this high-tech beeper. Instead of building a movie around the 90s, they built the 90s into the movie. And that's also why that movie is so mediocre and why it kind of makes you feel like, how does a movie like that make $1 billion?
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Then you look at this James Mangold tweet. At the point when work, writing, and directing big franchises have become emotionally loaded equivalent of writing a new chapter of the Bible with the probable danger of being stoned and called a blasphemer, then a lot of bolder minds are gonna leave these films to hacks and corporate boards. And that's why you start seeing a lot of creative people going towards Netflix. Netflix is where creative people go because they're willing to put the money into anything.
Netflix, you're greenlit. Who am I speaking with?
Creative minds will prefer to go to Netflix because they will tell you, hey, push this farther. You even have somebody like Zack Snyder when it comes to Netflix saying there are no handcuffs on me at all with this one.
F is for family. Oh, yes. Season 2. Edgy for a comedy show, for a animated show.
Yes, that's because we're on Netflix and they let us basically do whatever we want. In fact, the first season, their network notes were push it further, which is basically the dream if you're in a writer's room.
What we're saying is it is important to follow the creativity, to demand more, whether it's in your music, in your video games, or in your movies. Maybe take a risk on an M. Night Shyamalan movie or a Hellboy, for a most recent example. Take risks on those. Follow different platforms. Follow Amazon Prime or Netflix in this case. Consume those movies, take risks, and look at things outside of the norm. And know that genres deserve to be pushed further, to be pushed to their limits, to create new genres, to create new and exciting types of films, types of music, types of video games, types of TV shows. That's how we get there, is directors, is creative minds pushing as far as they can, coming up with new ideas. Consume those. Don't just take the most mundane thing that's delivered to you and accept it.
And that is where creativity spawns future creativity. People get inspired by creative minds. And that's how we get the progression of creativity in entertainment. But lately it kind of feels where people just ignore that and it's all manufactured. And again, this sounds like fist waving, but it really is at a point where it feels like creativity is slowing down. People are less likely to enjoy something that isn't a substantial formula algorithm that is susceptible to mass appeal in all different forms. Look at those other genres, look at those other types of movies and enjoy them for what they are. Like, would Bird Box be popular in theaters if it wasn't on Netflix? Probably not. It would have lost a shit ton of money. It probably would have been marketed poorly. It would have probably just floundered and made very little. But on Netflix, it got a platform where they could have a movie that is very simple at some points, but deliberately creative at other points and embrace those type of things so people will feel comfortable with trying to push that genre or try to push that envelope. Just remember, because something makes a lot of money doesn't always make it the best. McDonald's doesn't sell the best hamburgers, Justin Bieber isn't the greatest musical artist of all time, and Avatar by far is not the greatest movie of all time. Money doesn't always mean quality. That's just another example of when mediocrity wins.
That's all I have to say about that.
We'll continue our fist waving into the air.
Get off my lawn.
In case I don't see you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. You're one of very few to make it to the end.
Yes, thank you very much.
Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Comic Movie Marks Podcast and hit the notification bell. You know, all these fucking YouTube channels say this shit, so I'm going to say it now.
Yes, it's perfect. And if you want to hear our full podcast, you can check out our podcast on iTunes or any other podcast subscription service.
Make sure you subscribe. Thanks again.
Yo!